In 2025, after years of silence, a former security guard known only as Ricky has come forward with disturbing revelations about what truly happened during his years patrolling Skinwalker Ranch. Once a skeptic, Ricky's chilling new statements paint a terrifying picture of the ranch's secrets, one involving classified research, unexplained energy readings, and an encounter that changed him forever. Stay tuned and make sure to subscribe, because what Ricky reveals may finally explain why the government has tried so hard to keep this place hidden. When Ricky finally decided to speak publicly, it wasn't in a studio or on a polished podcast. It was in a dim storage unit on the outskirts of Vernal, Utah. Bare concrete, a single hanging bulb, and a table between him and the journalist who had been begging him for months to talk. His hands shook as he removed his baseball cap, revealing a streak of gray that hadn't been there a few years earlier. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "I can't keep this inside anymore," he whispered, as though afraid the walls themselves were listening. "People need to know what we were really dealing with." He began by explaining that his original reports, the notes he wrote after the Orb encounter, the statement about the missing time, even the strange radio interference, were altered before they were filed. "I know what I wrote," he said, "and what they archived wasn't it." When he confronted a supervisor, he was told the changes were necessary adjustments for national security. That phrase, he said, was repeated often whenever something couldn't be explained, whenever something went missing, whenever a sensor picked up readings that didn't match Earth's natural frequency. As he spoke, Ricky kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to burst through the door. He admitted he had been followed twice in the last month, cars with temporary plates. A man in a suit sitting outside his apartment for 3 nights in a row. "It's the same feeling I used to get on the ranch," he said. "Like something's studying you, measuring you." For the first time, Ricky revealed that after the Orb sighting in 2010, he experienced a series of electrical disturbances at home. Lights flickered, batteries drained instantly. His radio alarm turned on at 3:07 a.m. every night for weeks. Even after he unplugged it, "It was like whatever I saw didn't stay on the ranch," he said. "It followed me." By the time he finished that first session, the journalist stopped taking notes and simply watched in stunned silence. Ricky leaned forward, voice trembling. "They told us never to talk about the Orbs, never to talk about the figure in the field, never to talk about what the Mesa does at night. But I'm done being scared. It's time people knew the truth." Ricky said the turning point, the moment he realized the ranch wasn't just strange but dangerous, came a few weeks after his first sighting, when the surveillance system betrayed him. It was just after 1 a.m., a quiet night with no wind, no animal calls, not even the usual static popping from the fencing. He was alone in the monitoring station when every single camera feed froze at the exact same second. Not glitched, not scrambled, frozen. The timestamps stopped at 1:14:08 a.m. across all 9 screens. "I thought the system crashed," he explained, but when he stepped outside, the cold hit him like he'd walked into another world. The air felt pressurized, heavy, like being underwater. His breath came out in slow, foggy pulls. The field beyond the fence was so dark it looked unreal, flat, depthless, like a painted backdrop. Then the cameras came back, one by one, except what they showed made no sense. Every feed displayed the same thing, the tree line behind the northern field, except the trees were bending, not from wind, but as if something enormous was moving past them, brushing through them, shifting their trunks like grass. "It wasn't visible," Ricky said, "but you could see the shape by how the trees reacted, like something big enough to crush a truck was walking through them without making a sound." He zoomed one of the cameras in, and that's when the footage began to warp. The branches twisted into impossible angles, the shadows stretching long and thin as if the forest itself was being dragged through a funnel. Then the audio kicked in, an electric buzzing layered over a deep, rhythmic pulse that made the windows hum. "I couldn't move," he admitted. "I just watched." But the worst part wasn't the trees. It wasn't even the invisible mass pushing through them. It was what appeared for a single frame, so quick he wasn't even sure he saw it until he rewound the footage later. A figure, tall, distorted, almost humanoid, but elongated, like its proportions had been pulled in the wrong direction. And its head twitched unnaturally, as if flickering between shapes. When Ricky showed the clip to his supervisor the next morning, The man didn't react with shock or confusion. He simply nodded, reached into a drawer, and handed Ricky a pre-written form, a visual distortion anomaly report. But when Ricky tried to retrieve the footage later that day, the file was gone, not deleted, erased, with its data block overwritten so perfectly that even the system's internal log showed no trace it ever existed. That was the moment he understood. Whatever we were dealing with wasn't just on the ranch, it was controlling the ranch. Ricky said he could have handled the lights if they stayed in the sky. Strange orbs were practically part of the job description at Skinwalker Ranch. But what shook him, what truly broke him, was the night they followed him off the property. It happened after a long shift in late October. The air was sharp and metallic, the kind of cold that feels charged. He had been filing his end-of-night paperwork when he noticed a pale blue glow creeping across the far edge of the north pasture. At first, he thought it was a vehicle approaching, but the light lifted, slowly, weightlessly, hovering a few feet above the ground. Then, it split. One orb became two. Two became four. Each one pulsed, as if breathing. He recorded it again, but just like before, the footage jittered, warped, and refused to focus. The orbs drifted closer to the fence line, weaving in synchronized arcs. Not chaotic, not random, purposeful. The way they moved freaked me out, he said. Not because they were fast or unpredictable, but because they moved like they were thinking. When his shift ended, the orbs had already vanished. He convinced himself to forget it, chalk it up to another impossible night. But while driving home along the barren dirt road that led away from the property, he noticed something in his rearview mirror. A blue light. Not bright, not dramatic, just a faint sphere hovering above the road behind him, matching his speed exactly. He tapped the brakes. The orb slowed. He accelerated. The orb glided forward. And then, without warning, another appeared beside it, then a third. They formed a loose triangle behind his truck, drifting silently above the gravel as if tethered to him. Ricky said the fear didn't hit all at once. It crept up slowly, like rising pressure in his chest. It wasn't that they were following me, he whispered. It was that they weren't trying to hide it. They wanted me to know. At the bend in the road, just before the point where the ranch's security cameras could no longer see, something happened that shattered any last shred of skepticism he had. The orbs surged forward, closing the distance between them in a single fluid movement. For a split second, he thought they were going to collide with his truck. Instead, they passed through it. Blue light filling the interior like a camera flash underwater. Every electronic system in the vehicle died instantly. Engine off, headlights off, dashboard black. His truck rolled to a stop in total silence on an empty Utah back road at 4 a.m. Inside that darkness, Ricky truly felt that he was not alone. Then the orbs reappeared outside the windshield, aligned perfectly, as if waiting for him to react. And just as suddenly as they'd come, they vanished. His truck restarted on its own, but the message was delivered. The ranch doesn't end at the fence line, Ricky said. It follows you home. Ricky used to laugh at the stories of shadow figures roaming near the ranch's perimeter. He'd heard them all, tall silhouettes, faceless watchers, things that moved like liquid darkness. It was campfire material to him until the night something stepped out of the tree line and watched him breathe. It was early winter, cold enough that his breath fogged in the air like smoke. Ricky had parked his truck beside the eastern fence and was walking the perimeter on foot, checking for any tampering or broken posts. He'd done this route hundreds of times, and nothing unusual ever happened there. But that night, halfway through his sweep, he felt a sensation so strong he froze mid-step. Someone was staring at him, not from in front of him, not from behind, from the tree line. The feeling was primal, animalistic, like being singled out by a predator. He lifted his flashlight and scanned the branches. Nothing, just trees and darkness. He shook it off, forced himself to keep walking, but the sensation only grew heavier. It felt like the darkness itself was leaning in. Then he heard it, a footstep, not a twig snapping, not a rustle. A footstep, slow and deliberate, like someone trying to mimic the way a human walks, but not quite getting it right. He whipped his flashlight toward the noise. And there it was, a shape, a figure, a person-shaped outline standing between two dead trees. Except it was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Its edges shimmered as if its body couldn't decide what shape it wanted to be, like heat rising off asphalt. Except this was the middle of winter, and its head, if it even was a head, tilted slightly, as though studying him with curiosity. It looked like a person drawn out of smoke, Ricky said. Like the idea of a human, not the real thing. He shouted at it. No answer. It didn't move. It didn't even flinch. It stood there, completely still, as if waiting. Then it stepped forward. One fluid motion, silent as a sigh. Ricky raised his flashlight, but the beam bent around the thing instead of illuminating it. The light refused to touch it, bending away like two magnets repelling each other. That's when he realized this wasn't a trespasser or some animal. It was something that existed outside the rules of light and shadow. Instinct kicked in. He backed toward his truck slowly, terrified that if he broke eye contact or turned his back, the thing would rush him. But the figure didn't chase him. It simply stepped backward, straight backward, without turning its body, melting deeper into the darkness until it dissolved entirely. By the time Ricky reached the truck, his hands were shaking so violently he dropped the keys twice before getting inside. He slammed the doors, locked them, and stared at the tree line. Nothing moved, but the lingering sense of being watched stayed with him for hours. Later, when he told other guards what he'd seen, one of them whispered something that made his blood run cold. "You saw it too, huh? That thing that stands like a person, but isn't one." For the first time, Ricky realized he wasn't experiencing isolated incidents. Something intelligent was watching the ranch at night, and now it was watching him. For months, Ricky tried to convince himself that the orbs and the shifting figure were isolated incidents, stress, exhaustion, tricks of the night. But what happened next wasn't subtle, wasn't debatable, and wasn't something he could ever forget. It started with silence, not normal silence, the kind you get on a calm night. This was wrong. This was absolute. No crickets, no wind, no distant cows, no insects. It felt like sound itself had been removed from the world. Ricky said it was like walking into a vacuum, where even his breaths felt muted. He was patrolling near the western field, one of the quietest parts of the ranch, when the silence hit him like a wall. His first instinct was to check his hearing. He snapped his fingers next to his ear, cleared his throat, stomped his boot. He could hear himself, but nothing else. The entire ranch had gone dead. Then came the humming, a low, vibrating frequency, so deep he felt it in his chest before he heard it. It wasn't coming from the sky. It wasn't coming from the ground. It felt like it was coming from everywhere at once, like the air itself was resonating. Ricky spun in a slow circle, trying to pinpoint the source. His flashlight beam trembled, the trees shivered, the fence rattled as though something massive had brushed against it. And then the humming shifted, growing higher, sharper, almost metallic, as if hundreds of tones were stacking together into one impossible sound. When it changed pitch, he said, it felt like it was trying to communicate. And that's when he realized the cattle were missing. Not dead, not mutilated, not scattered, gone. 47 fully grown cattle vanished from the field in a span of minutes without a single hoofprint or broken fence line. Ricky swept the entire area with his flashlight, panic rising. Nothing, no bodies, no drag marks, no signs of predators. It was as if the herd had been lifted, removed cleanly, silently, while the rest of the ranch froze around him. The humming stopped just as suddenly as it began, and with it, the night sounds returned all at once, crashing back in a wave so loud it made him flinch. The cattle were later found unharmed in a completely different pasture, packed together in a tight circle like they'd been dropped there. No explanation, no tracks, no signs of panic. Ricky didn't believe in abductions until that night. A few weeks after the cattle incident, Ricky stumbled onto something that made every encounter before it feel tame. He discovered a recording, one buried deep in the ranch's internal audio system, that he was never meant to hear. It started when he noticed one of the security monitors looping the same 5-second clip over and over. Curious, he opened the system's archive to reset it. That's when he found an unlabeled audio file sitting in a secure folder he didn't recognize. It shouldn't have been there. He didn't have clearance for it, but the file wasn't locked, so he clicked play. What came through his headphones wasn't static. It was whispering, dozens of voices layered together, speaking too quickly and too quietly for him to understand, like a crowd muttering in a language older than English, older than anything he'd ever heard. The voices rose and fell in waves, almost rhythmic, as if chanting. Then the whispers stopped. A single voice, low, distorted, almost mechanical, cut through the silence. It said his name, slowly, perfectly. Ricky! Ricky ripped the headphones off so fast they snapped against the desk. His first instinct was to check the cameras, convinced someone was in the building with him, but every screen showed empty hallways, motionless field, silent pastures. He replayed the file. This time, the voice didn't say his name. Instead, it whispered, "Behind you." He spun in his chair so violently he fell to the floor. But no one was there. No footsteps, no breathing, no shadows. When he looked back at the computer, the file was gone. Not deleted, erased. As if it had never existed at all. Ricky didn't tell anyone about the incident for months. Some things on the ranch, he realized, don't want to be recorded. And some things are already listening. After the whispers and the vanishing audio file, Ricky tried to convince himself he was just exhausted, that the ranch was getting into his head like it had so many others. But a few nights later, he learned the truth. The ranch wasn't staying on the ranch. It was following him. He had just finished a brutal shift and was driving home along the narrow desert road that cut through the basin. No lights, no houses, just miles of darkness pressing in on both sides. He rolled down his window, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling still crawling up his spine from the audiophile incident. That's when he saw it. Something moved behind his truck in the rearview mirror, not on the road, not on the shoulder, in the middle of the darkness, keeping pace with him. At first he thought it was dust, or a shadow cast by his headlights. But dust doesn't run. Shadows don't change shape. And nothing human moves like that, sliding and flickering as if phasing in and out of reality. The figure was tall, too tall, lanky, liquid. Just like the thing described by campers, trespassers, and terrified eyewitnesses for decades. Ricky accelerated. So did it. The faster he went, the closer it came. Its outline warping like heat over asphalt. Sometimes humanoid, sometimes something else entirely. For a moment, it almost looked like it was leaning forward, studying him. When he reached the outskirts of town, the figure stopped abruptly. He watched in the mirror as it simply folded backward into the darkness and vanished. That night, as he walked up his driveway, every instinct screamed that something was behind him. Every hair on his arms stood straight up. His own house didn't feel safe, and that's when it finally hit him. What he had seen on the ranch wasn't tied to the land. It was tied to him. And once it notices you, it doesn't forget. For weeks after the figure followed him home, Ricky lived in a state of constant dread. Doors locked, curtains drawn, lights on all night. His co-workers could tell something in him had changed, but even then, he refused to admit what he had seen. It wasn't until the ranch itself pushed him to the breaking point that he finally understood he couldn't keep quiet anymore. It happened during another graveyard shift. The wind had died. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in less than a minute, and somewhere near the tree line, a faint static hum began rising. Almost identical to the sound he'd heard the night the cattle were mutilated, Ricky's heart slammed into his ribs. He stepped out of the security shack, flashlight shaking in his hand, and the humming grew louder. Then everything stopped. The lights on the ranch blinked out. His radio died. His phone shut off. Even the security monitors inside the shack collapsed into darkness. At the far edge of the property, a single orb appeared, blue, pulsing, alive. And this time, it wasn't far away in the sky. It was hovering 10 feet off the ground, drifting toward him like it had a mind of its own. As Ricky backed up, he realized something horrifying. The orb wasn't just floating. It was searching, sweeping across the ground like a spotlight, pausing on equipment, on structures, on the fence line, until, finally, It stopped on him. The beam tightened as if focusing, analyzing, recognizing him. Ricky froze. His breath caught, his chest locked. He could feel the hair rising on his neck, the same sensation he'd felt when the figure had stalked him home. Then the orb blinked out. Instantly, the hum vanished. The ranch lights came roaring back to life. His radio buzzed with static. The monitors flickered on as though nothing had happened. But Ricky knew better. That was intentional. It was a demonstration, and it was a message. He quit that night. But the ranch wasn't finished with him. Over the next month, the high-pitched hum returned outside his home. Once behind his house, once near the fence, once directly under his bedroom window. Items in his garage moved without explanation. His dog refused to go near the backyard. And twice, in the reflection of his living room window, he swore he saw a tall, formless figure standing in the center of his yard, just watching. The final straw came when he checked his phone one morning and found a single audio file saved in his recording folder, a file he didn't remember making. When he played it, the blood drained from his face. It was the same static whispering he had heard from the cattle field years earlier, except now, buried beneath the distortion, he could hear something else. His name, repeated over and over, soft at first, then clear enough to shatter him. Ricky, Ricky, Ricky. He deleted the file, swore he'd never speak of it, tried to bury the memory so deep it could never surface. But secrets like these don't stay buried forever. In 2025, after 2 decades of silence, and after watching the ranch's mysteries escalate beyond anything he had faced, Ricky finally broke. He contacted producers, investigators, journalists, anyone who would listen. And now he's revealing everything. The orbs, the mutilations, the impossible figure, the whispering, the evidence he tried to hide, and the truth that forced him into silence. His warning is simple. It follows you. It learns you. And once it notices you, you're part of it. This isn't just another Skinwalker Ranch story. It's the confession that could change the entire investigation forever.